Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to What You Want. Thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at a pioneering reference from late 90s Breitling. This is the Breitling Chronomat Blackbird, reference A13350. Now, this watch was an entrant in the classic Chronomat series that was geared a little bit more toward a subdued aesthetic. It wasn't high polish, it was brushed. Every facet, from the case to the bracelet itself, the clasp, to the bezel, even the dial features a matte treatment. It's Breitling, but quietly confident. Great wrist presence, great aerospace imagery here, but again, with that slightly subdued, slightly understated look to it. Named after the famed SR-71 Blackbird spy plane, this one really trades on its stealth effect. On the wrist, 40 millimeters, very compact. Now the watch is 15 millimeters thick, so it's not a dress watch in that sense. It does cut a low profile because the limited reflection on the case as well as the dial really speaks to a different sensibility than, for instance, the high polished Chronomats, the Avengers, the Breitling for Bentley. The bigger the watch and the more polished, the less discreet. And I think this is an older school of Breitling design, sort of revived from 1997 on. I should mention that this reference here, the A13350, is part of the post chronometer certification when Breitling started blanket certifying everything after 2000. So this is not one of the earliest in the series, but it does embody the early aesthetic of those watches, albeit with two changes: the chronometer grade movement and the Arabic indicators on the dial. The Arabic numerals and the chronometer certification were evolutions, running changes made to the watch after 97 during the early 2000s. So you really get a lot of the best of both worlds. That neo-classic look, understated, subtle, quietly confident, with some refinements like the classical Arabic numerals, which I really associate with pilots' watches. When I think of mid-century pilot models, I really think of things like the IWC Mark 11, the original Breitling Navitimer. I think of watches that have discernible numerals, not hashed ticks or stick indexes. And this watch really satisfies that essential, I think, vintage nostalgia for old school flight instrumentation. Plus, with the chronometer grade movement, you've got a little feather in your cap, so to speak, that adds refinement to the movement and refinement to the watch as a whole. Now, on my wrist, which is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters, you can see it sits nice and flat. It's a comfortable reference to wear because its mass is pretty minimal. Honestly, I feel that it probably weighs less than your standard 36 millimeter Rolex Datejust, and it definitely wears smaller than the 40 millimeter Rolex sports watches. Even the 5-digit references with the lighter stamped clasps and hollow end-link bracelets, this Blackbird just sits lighter on the wrist and wears lighter. Not a lack of substance, just an elegance to it, a delicacy that's really becoming of a Breitling in a way that few are today. This is old school Breitling. This is, in a lot of ways, pre-1980 Breitling revived, the way they used to make them. An instrument, unpretentious, beautiful in a utilitarian sense. I really like the way this looks, and I like the combination of the bezel screws on the flanks. You can see them. They do serve a purpose. They actually hold the bezel to the watch itself. The bezel can't simply be snapped off or popped off with a screwdriver, like sometimes happens on Omegas and Rolexes that have a snap-on bezel. This one has to be physically detached by loosening and removing every one of those screws. Likewise, the rider tabs on the bezel itself, you see them here and here. They give you a better purchase on this unidirectional rotating bezel that makes it easy to operate when you're wearing gloves, when your hands are wet, when you might be sweaty. And this is a versatile timepiece. The Chronomat was Breitling's comeback watch in the early 1980s. After Ernest Snyder bought the company from the last of the Breitling family, he actually refashioned it as a professional instrument firm. A pilot himself, he jointly embraced quartz and automatics in deference to the modern era, but he brought the company back largely on the basis of his new Chronomat. Originally a circular slide rule watch, much like the Navitimer, but less deluxe, fewer features, the Chronomat was reborn as a modern sports chronograph and a versatile reference. Used by pilots, it also spawned some, I would like to call them dual sport models, like this Chronomat Blackbird, because while this is built in the image of a pilot's watch, and it can be used as such, the bottom line is it also features 100-meter water resistance and that unidirectional, it's not bidirectional, it's a unidirectional dive bezel. So you have a lot of options here. Plus, there is a screw-down crown. You can see I have it screwed out so you can see the threading. and the fact that this watch is quite water resistant. This is not one of your 30-meter Navitimers. This is, in a lot of ways, a do-it-all sports watch. While it lacks the circular slide rule, I find that most people discover a unidirectional rotating bezel as a second timer in parallel to the chronograph is just a more versatile, more practical feature for them. Now the watch does have that subdued, highly complicated calibrated dial, but in my opinion, by going with Arabic numerals in lieu of stick indexes, the time-telling functions of the watch are differentiated from, for instance, the tachometer and the multitude of calibrations on the rehaut, the chapter ring around the edge of the dial. So it's very easy to tell time on this dial. Also, the fact that the hands themselves are white. You might think in the reflections caused by the iPhone that these are silvered, but they are in fact white, and they stand out in stark contrast to the base of the dial. Outstanding legibility. You can tell the time on this watch at arm's length, and I really like that. I like that versatility. I like the fact that while it is a highly technical sports watch, it serves its primary purpose with utmost utility. There is never difficulty discerning what time it is. And I find on some of the more complex Navitimers, there are times when I kind of have to do a double take to figure out what time I'm looking at. Not so with this Chronomat Blackbird. Well done, Breitling. Now, the classical elements of those early chronomats are present in force. The onion-type crown and pushers. I should mention the crown is a screw down, the pushers are not. And of course, these distinctive Breitling rider tabs and bezel bolts. Not just functional, they're also part of the modern stylistic heritage of the Chronomat line, now shared with the Avengers. The bracelet is the Breitling 5-link Pilot with a slash cut, all brushed finished on the shoulders and the tops of the links, very supple on the wrist, and the bracelet is a double deployant clamshell, or excuse me, single deployant clamshell, as you see right here. Closes with a snap and a snick, very solid. This watch is in outstanding condition, and it's available with 100% original boxes, papers, technical manuals, and all accessories and documents of provenance. This is an outstanding alternative to something like a Rolex Daytona at a fantastic value price with a bulletproof Valjoux 7750 Breitling caliber 13 movement. You really give up nothing in functionality, and I feel that you gain something that's a little bit unique, not just among Breitlings in as much as the finish is a bit more subdued, a bit more subtle, but among all sports watches. You see a lot of Omega Speedmasters out there, and you see a lot of Rolex Daytonas. In contrast, something like a Chronomat Blackbird, a discreet, quietly confident, mid-sized 40mm Breitling sports watch, you're not going to see one of these in every office. This is a watch that really cuts its own profile and goes its own way, and I have a feeling that if all that sounds appealing to you, you need to check out the high-resolution images of this Breitling Chronomat Blackbird on our website, Watch You Want. I have a feeling that if you're into SR-71s, if you're into sports watches, if you like the idea of flight, but you're more likely to go in the water, then the Chronomat Blackbird just may be the watch you want.